Hello everybody, here we go. Now I'm going to show you some of my earlier attempts at engraving. When I started my apprenticeship in November, this is with Mr. Harry Kell, I started there in November 1950, having absolutely no idea what engraving on guns was until I'd been to Purdy's and they'd shown me a few bits and pieces that I felt it was impossible to engrave. It looked so intricate, and I said to my mother, don't think I could ever do that, mother. And so I went to Purdy's and started drawing a few little bits, and they said, yes, I think you're quite capable of being an apprentice. So I stayed at the gun factory for a month or two, and then I was able to go to Harry Kell's because they put up a workbench for me to get me everything. And in the November I started, and so it was coming up to winter time. The lights were getting dim. We only had, shall we say, a 75-watt bulb in hanging from the ceiling. We worked up until dusk, until you could hardly see anything. And of course then Harry Kell showed me how to sharpen my tools, gave me a piece of steel to work on. When I'd finished that, just like these things you can see here, I filed them out. You can see the plate is all buckled, but I must have filed this down about 5 or 6 times, lost all my other earlier bits of engraving. So that means to say I've just got these limited pieces. So these were the borders we used to practice on. So the young apprentices, when they were quite capable of doing something within a short time, they were put to work on doing the borders around the edges of the plates, while the other workmen got on with their work. See. So we had absolutely no magnification. We had very poor lighting. There's another one. You should see how it goes. And you see those little marks in there? That was testing my gravers. Okay. Yes, we were working in Dickensian sort of old building with a fire in the grate, no heating at all as such, just a bit of coal in the morning. You started a fire with a bit of tinder and you sat there with your coats on, and we had nothing like you've got now with the magnification. We didn't have that. It was just the same old routine that they'd done for hundreds of years, working in the same way. Okay, so that's the scroll, and then I would gradually go on and do a little bit more, something like that, you see. I'm gradually getting the knack of the engraving. This may be a bit earlier, I'll have to reckon it out. But you see, sometimes I put the dates on the side of the plates, and these were done within around about 4 months of my apprenticeship. 6, here we go. Another small scroll. Now all the Purdy's and the gun makers wanted me to do, really, they didn't exactly want me to go into doing all the intricate work I later on developed. They just wanted me to, shall we say, to be a hack engraver. They had 70 guns a year to turn out, and they were mainly small scroll like this, and so that is more or less what they apprenticed me to do. But because I thought it was rather routine and boring, I gradually wanted to do a bit more artistic stuff. Now this is Kell's style of scroll, but then, even then, I wanted to put a bit more design into things. I wasn't a 9 to 5, didn't bother with you know, I loved the work. I wanted to improve myself. I stayed behind in my lunch hour to practice. Where said other guys when they'd gone out and done things, you know, I did go out a few times, of course, you know, but because I was so keen, you know, that it's not as though I was getting paid any money, 27 shillings a week when we first started at £1. So it's today, I don't know what it would be worth. Apprenticeship, you know, by the age of 21, you'll be earning £4 a week. It's not very much money in those days. And of course, you were working for your governor, and he would have taken, you know, that's what you did in the old days. This is the open work, like Purdy's open work you were doing, you see. Maybe I'm rushing a little bit of these and going through a little bit earlier, but of course these were all done within 12 months and 14 months and 16 months of my apprenticeship, you see. I don't know how clear this is. Oh, yes, I'm coming a bit closer now. But you see, that's the open work, the Purdy style open work we used to do on the trigger guards, and the scroll work. And you gradually develop your own style. So we didn't have any of this GRS style of engraving tools, you know, with the pneumatic stuff. It was all hand pushed. Yeah, some open work again. You see, I wanted to do a bigger plate. I was keen. And so I started to design things. I always felt as though if you could, there we are, if you could do the difficult stuff, the easier stuff, you know, the run-of-the-mill stuff would be easy. So I always to test myself. I liked looking at some of the old engravers and seeing their style and trying to develop my technique even as a young boy like that. We didn't know, you know, what the future would hold. So here, you see, we had to cut all the way by hand, all the background there. I had my tools. I sharpened them. I would ground them down. This is the thing. You had the engravers. You bought them from the shop for about £0.50. That's English money, of course. Very, you know, £1. It was a lot of money in those days. And £0.50 was a quarter of what the pound was. And so we went to the jewellers, people here. Oh, I've lost myself now. Oh, here we go. And you bought one of these tools, you brought it back, you ground it down, you tempered it. You tempered it to a straw colour so that the points didn't break off because they were quite, well, tool hard. But nothing like the steel you have today, you know, where the point stays on forever sort of thing, and you've got a diamond wheel to grind it down. We just had an Arkansas stone and a drop of oil and just 1-2 strokes on that, and it was sharp again to what this was. And that's the thing. See a little border around there, we call that the cut border on there, and everything was cut away by hand. Later on they got, Harry Keller used what we call a lining tool, and it was to save time to cut away the backgrounds. But that was the old method, the old style technique, you see. What's on this side? Okay, it's open scroll again, you see. And the flowers, practicing the flowers. That rose in the centre was the typical gun engraver's style of rose. It's very commercial. You had to turn these guns out in as little time as possible. 58 hours for a gun. That means to say 2 lock plates, the lever, the guard, the base of the gun, the bottoms, the bumps of the guard, the levers, the back strap. And so there was quite a fair amount on there. Okay. And there's another one. Are we coming back again? Now you see, So I like to design something to get a little bit more into it. I know this is a long practice. Okay. Giving you some idea of what I was doing. And I was getting a bit better. I used to go in, do you know something? I used to go in on a Saturday morning by myself. This is later on, and practice. I used to have a few little jobs that I was given by friends of mine, and but you see, it was the love of the engraving. And you even felt as though I would pay to be able to engrave. That's how enthusiastic I was. You see? And of course, I was so proud of sometimes what I was doing, because most kids in those days didn't have a lot, so I used to go put these in my pocket and take down and show my friends, show them how I was doing, you know. And maybe I wasn't cocky, but I was just, it's unusual, you see. They often say, "What are you doing, Ken?" And I said, well, this is what we do on guns, you see. Oh, I never knew these were going to go on guns. The only guns I ever saw with any ornamentation like armour and things like that was at the museum. I used to go along to the Kensington Victoria and Albert Museum and look at their various antique armours and things like that. And you could get in for free when you were a kid, and you could go there and you could wonder at the art of the past. And of course I had absolutely no idea that this is what I would be doing for a profession, if you call it a profession, see. Now that's what we call the shell border up the top there. And this was like a Harry Kell style scroll. And I just followed it, the type of thing. Now I look at it and I think, yes. Well, that's what you do, you see, over the years. You gradually get new ideas and you put your own shapes in. I look at the shapes now and I think, I don't really care for some of that. But at the time, you know, it's a wondrous type of thing. You know, Harry Kell was the top engraver for guns. And that's their style of scroll, you see. He developed this style. Instead of putting the whole type of leaf effect in like you do on a canvas, it was all these little knob type of things. But it looked good. And that's how you can recognise your hand engraving. You see, you can recognise your engraving by the style coming from the workshop. Yeah, I mean, you will look at Nemschke's work, and you'll see that. You look at Weldon, Lister's work, and you say, yeah, that's Weldon's. You look at Sam Mufano's work, yeah, it's Sam's. You can spot. And of course, with the gun engravers, you know, I see guns now, and I just tap through and I say, oh, that was done by Jack Sumner, that was done by Harry Kell, Harry Kell's father, that was done by Warren, that was done by Lucas, that was by all these various other people, all doing, shall we say, a small scroll work. You see? There we go. I should put these in rotation really, but that's the type of thing I'm doing. It was a very austere period in 1950, 5 years after the war. Very austere, having no idea. You know, Kell didn't mention prices for the guns. I've got a rough idea, but even Purdes and people like that kept you in ignorance of certain things. Here we go.